Hi. Let's talk about the physical and the cultural geographic implications of The Great Auk novel by Alan Eckert. First of all, in terms of physical geography, what comes to mind first is, where is LD Island? Where is Iceland? Where is Greenland? Where's Labrador? Where's the tip of Cape Cod? Where are the barrier islands surrounding North Carolina and South Carolina? But beyond the where are things in relationship to each other? What are the distances between each of those places? Now, beyond the absolute location, there's also the relative location in terms of scale. How far are these places apart? How far did the Great Auks have to migrate? Why did they have to migrate? What influence were ocean currents on their migration route? What about seasons? Why did they have to migrate in summer up to the northern latitudes and in winter down to the southern latitudes? What influence did hurricane paths have on that second season when they were down in the Carolinas that was so destructive to the Great Auks? So these are just a few of the physical geography components that can be considered when reading and studying the novel The Great Auk. Another thing is that the Great Auks had to pass through all kinds of different ecoregions. And those were both onshore and offshore. So let's study the ecoregions that are present in the Carolinas versus in Maine versus in Labrador versus in Greenland versus in LD Island off of Iceland. Another thing that comes to mind is the winds. Certain times in the novel, the Auks encountered great storms. What is the presence of these North Atlantic storms? I also mentioned hurricanes just a minute ago. Another thing that comes to mind is there are all kinds of influences on the Gulf Stream, on climate. For example, as we know, the Gulf Stream flows north, and it makes a place like Iceland much more habitable than it would be if the Gulf Stream wasn't there. This is the ocean current that brings warm water from the Caribbean and the sort of the mid-latitudes up to the northern latitudes. It also, of course, influences the fact that you've got northern latitudes in Europe that are 50, 55, 60 degrees north, and their corresponding latitudes over in North America are much colder, again, because of the influence of the Gulf Stream. So what did that have as far as influence on the Great Auk and its migration? So these are a few of the physical geography components. What about cultural geography? Well, when we think about the story of the Great Auk and the demise of that species, tragically, we think about the convergence of space and time and cultural geography. Culturally, why were the feathers and the meat of the Great Auk so highly prized? What in culture and society brought about that demand? Also, what comes to mind are the means of navigating around the oceans. This was in the mid-1800s, and people had much more flexibility and much more mobility in terms of navigating the oceans than they did 50 or 100 years prior. So that also helped bring these hunters to places like Labrador and LD Island where they could hunt the Great Auks. That could not have been possible had the technology not been there. Another thing that is prominent in the story is the chapter on when scientists came to collect specimens of these live Great Auks. And it proved to be destructive in the same way that the hunters brought destruction. Maybe on a smaller scale, but it was destruction nonetheless. So, in the scientific community, what spurred the interest in the Great Auks? And you could have a debate among students. Was that a good thing? Was that not a good thing? What could we have done to protect and save the Great Auks? If that were the case today, would we be protecting the Great Auks? Or would we be powerless to do anything about it? You could also talk about other species like the passenger pigeon and others, not just bird species, but other species that have gone extinct. Why they've gone extinct and what spurred the demand for those species. What encroached upon their habitat. All of these considerations, folks, have to do with physical and cultural geography. And so there's lots more we could say, but I invite you to look at those things as you study novels like The Great Auk. Because my contention is that the study of physical and cultural geography adds a richness, it adds a depth, it adds a holistic thinking to the study of language arts.